Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber, and today we are checking out the Templin Institute's latest video. This is The Blood Angels. Let's get into it.
In the brutal life of a space marine, there is little room for anything but the art of war. Beauty, grace, artistry, and empathy, all of these are discarded within a galaxy of only carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods. It is perhaps a miracle, then, that within one of the greatest chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, there persists a deep appreciation for these forgotten aspects, which at their core remain innately human. The warriors of this chapter were lifted up from savage beginnings, driven by ideals of humanity and hope that have endured to form the core of their creed. Within them still blazes the beauty, grace, artistry, and empathy of the great angel Sanguinius.
Oh, Sanguinius. He's the pretty boy of the Primarchs, so right there I have some baseline level of resentment.
Yet now offset by a rage and ruthlessness fueled by his slaughter at the hands of the archenemy. And while the most triumphant among them can only be a pale imitation of their fallen Primarch, all have risen to meet this legacy. Those who have supped from the sanguinary chalices and survived are noble in spirit, honorable in manner, furious in battle, and worthy of the title Blood Angel.
That was a nice animated sequence there.
Like every Space Marine Legion, the Blood Angels were founded during the latter days of the Unification Wars, and the first, faltering steps of the Great Crusade. Known then simply as the 9th Legion Astartes, they bore little resemblance to the angelic figures they would become. On Terra's bloody soil, and in the Xenos-infested moons of Jupiter, they earned for themselves a grim reputation. Though they brought to ruin some of the worst abominations left over from Old Night in order to tame Sol for their Emperor, the 9th Legion would become little more than outcasts for their savage and cruel approach to war. The process of Astartes
Okay, I'm confused. Just based on their, it sounds like commitment to both brutality and artistry.
Transformation gave each Marine an echo of the angelic features of their Primarch, still lost to them somewhere across the galaxy, but this only served to highlight the horrors they inflicted. Adopting the title of the Revenant Legion, they allowed their savagery in battle to become ever more excessive. Rumors surrounding the fate of several Imperial Army regiments assigned to their side, the hushed whispers of the brutal campaign of Ki Baran, and their actions during the Second Siege of Urant, earned the Legion the personal censor of Primarch Rogel Dawn, and cemented their cruel reputation across the growing Imperium.
Yeah, you're not selling me on these guys as being great.
They were not the first Space Marine Legion to cross the boundaries of conduct set forth by the Emperor. And while the 9th may never have suspected it, for a brief moment an executioner's sword hung above them, waiting for the order to cast them down, an order given only twice before. With the fate of the Legion in the balance came their salvation.
I mean, it is always funny just to see that how the rank and file so often don't realize just how high up their misconduct can go. You know, the number of times where I have had soldiers in my command who've gotten in trouble or been, unfortunately, like the victims of another soldier doing something inappropriate. And I have to brief general officers, garrison commanders, right, of what sounds like a pretty routine thing. But, you know, if you're someone like the Emperor, for whom, like, defending humanity is the core principle of his existence, if you are, say, killing civilians, even on a comparatively small scale, it may be something that he as a commander is especially sensitive to. Right, and that's true of every commander that I've ever worked for. They all obviously have their guidance and their mission that they're all committed to, but often every one of them has certain things that they become, I don't want to say fixated on, but view as being important, sometimes disproportionately. You know, for me, it was knowledge in my soldiers. I really wanted them to know what we were doing, where we were going, why we were doing it, to understand the other maneuver elements in the mission. And while some commanders view that as a liability, your soldiers having a lot of information, to me, it was a failsafe, because if a commander everybody from myself down to my team leads, say, got sick or got hurt or had to come off mission, then I knew that the person below them could step up and could execute the mission to the same standard. But that was what I would do is grill my soldiers. Okay, what is our objective? What is our grid we're going to maneuver to? What's the primary and secondary, infill and exfil routes, right? I wanted them all to know it, or at least have it recorded, written down in like a notebook that they kept on them. And so, yeah, that was me, right? That was my predilection. I had a commander who was obsessed with checking fire extinguishers because he believed that if you didn't let fire extinguishers expire, that you would be equally fastidious with all other things, which is silly because once everyone figured out that fire extinguishers were his thing, they would just update their fire extinguishers and ignore the other stuff.
On an arid, radiation-baked moon orbiting the world of Baal, Baal Secundus, an angel of a man, had arisen to unite the tribes of his home world in peaceful coexistence. A figure of perfect features and unrivaled grace, this man was worshipped as a god, soaring above his followers on a pair of immense angelic wings.
Of course Big E was like, I'm going to give one of these guys fucking wings.
He was named Sanguinius, a lost son of the Emperor and lost Primarch of the 9th Legion. Sanguinius had survived in the inhospitable ruins of a shattered world, and yet this had only served to refine his humanity. It is said that when he finally reunited with the Emperor of Man, he wept crystal tears from which flowers sprouted when they fell to earth.
I just love how people are like, the essential qualities of humanity: compassion, art, love. Like, there's just as much evidence that the absolute bloodbath level of cruelty perpetrated by the 9th Legion is just as essential to human characteristics. You know, there's very few animals in the animal kingdom that engaged in organized warfare. Our close cousins, great ape or monkeys and apes often do so, but there's very few other examples other than human beings, and no human being does it at the scale that we do, or no other creature rather. So I think that's as essential to humanity as, painting a nice picture or singing a cute song.
From his father, he asked only that his people be spared, knowing full well that the pious sons of Baal were not of the kind the Emperor desired for his Imperium. When the Emperor granted this request and reunited Sanguinius with his legion, it was this same empathy that drove him to see the promise in these blood-soaked killers. Refusing to acknowledge that they were beyond the hope of salvation, Sanguinius guided his sons to resist their deep-rooted thirst for blood and savagery, encouraging them to heighten their humanity rather than debase it. It was through this effort that they took on a new name, the Blood Angels.
Okay, it's just interesting that these Blood Angels are genetically extremely similar to Sanguinius, and yet this seems like one of the few examples, Angron perhaps being the other, in which the nature of the Legion and the nature of their Primarch are at such stark odds, right? And with the case of Angron, there's a logic to it, right? There's a logical explanation. Angron, of course, having the Butcher's Nails to make him highly aggressive and fundamentally change his personality. But Sanguinius seems to have not been influenced, right? Or has developed naturally, right? There's no internal thing messing with his mind. And yet he just has this very peaceful, angelic nature. And yet his Space Marines have this phenomenal, unprecedented level of cruelty.
And it was a title they would earn, fighting at the side of Sanguinius' closest brother, the War Master Horus Lupercal. The friendship between Sanguinius and Horus was legendary, even inspiring feelings of jealousy amidst their brother Primarchs. Across the ranks of the Lunar Wolves, Horus's own legion, Sanguinius saw an example that his blood angels should strive to embody. By fighting at the side of the Lunar Wolves, the Ninth Legion found in themselves a new sense of honor, discipline, and even mercy. They began to hold themselves to a greater standard, and to seek more in war than simply bloodshed. As the Great Crusade neared its apex, the Legion had been transformed. Cleansed with the gore-splattered killers of the Revenant Legion, in their place stood the Blood Angels, a true brotherhood of warriors, as proud and angelic as their Primarch father. But the flaws of the Ninth Legion were rooted in its very gene seed, and for some, it was too much to overcome. Hidden from all but a select few, corruption within the Legion was slowly worming its way through their ranks. In the heat of battle, some warriors would break, plunging into an orgy of violence that recalled the nightmare days of the Revenants.
Still waiting to hear how Sanguinius is also afflicted by this, because he must be.
Those who recovered would be shocked and disgusted by what they had done, but for others, the madness would never fade, growing deeper until all reason and sanity was gone. For these afflicted Blood Angels, all that could be done was a swift execution, often undertaken in secret by the Primarch himself. Under the study of the apothecaries, this affliction was named the Red Thirst. To Sanguinius' horror, it seemed there was little that could stem the outbreak, and the angel foresaw that it would eventually swallow his legion entirely. The War Master Horus.
Yeah. Again, raises this really interesting question about why it didn't appear in Sanguinius. I mean, clearly the Emperor did a bunch of other extracurricular work on him since he engineered him to have bird wings.
Horus would gain knowledge of this flaw, swearing never to reveal what he had learned. But with his fall to the ruinous powers of chaos, this oath was cast aside. Of his brothers, Horus feared Sanguinius above all, and in his opening strike against the Imperium, the traitor War Master sought to use the Red Thirst to shatter the Blood Angels. Before his betrayal was revealed, the Ninth Legion was ordered by Horus to the Cygnus Cluster, lured with the promise of a cure for the Red Thirst. Here, the trap was sprung. The entire system had fallen prey to the power of chaos, and left overrun by their demonic hordes. Upon the twisted and mind-bending hellscape of Cygnus Prime, the Legion reached its breaking point. Kabanta, the champion of the blood god Khorne, a creature of pure rage and hatred, struck down Sanguinius and hundreds of his sons. At the sight of their Primarch wounded and seemingly dead, the Blood Angels were pushed back into the state of bestial violence they had strove for years to overcome. In that moment, the Red Thirst took hold of them by the thousands. Only with Sanguinius' reawakening were they pulled back from the brink of utter ruin.
Always the level of weird standing for the Primarchs is so bizarre to me. It's definitely true that your commander getting killed, right, can be a morale crusher, but this is usually meant in a larger campaign sense. Not usually in an individual battle does your commander die and you lose your fucking mind, and then when he comes back you get your mind back. We all know that's not how people work, but also when these commanders die or are killed in battle, it's a rumor that spreads throughout the troops. And it's interesting because often in history these are exaggerated, they are not real rumors, they are only tangentially related to the truth, and it can be really hard for commanders to keep a lid on false rumors, all these sort of really lies that can crush morale or that can raise hopes and then dash them again.
But the damage was done. Rather than finding a cure to the Red Thirst, a new shadow now lay across their souls, deeper than before and rooted in something more fundamental than simple bloodlust. The true extent of this new affliction, what would come to be known as the Black Rage, would only be fully realized with the fate of Sanguinius himself. As the Horus heresy...
This is this has some vampirism combined with Super Saiyan vibes, where the red thirst is like level 1, and then like the black rage is like Super Saiyan, level 2 or whatever.
He tore the galaxy asunder. The Blood Angels escaped the Cygnus cluster and arrived in Ultramar, the realm of the Primarch Rabute Guilliman. Guilliman offered Sanguinius the position of Emperor over his newly founded Imperium Secundus, and while Sanguinius reluctantly accepted, the Angel knew that his true fate lay with his father. In a desperate gambit, the Blood Angels plunged through the roiling warp storms that divided the galaxy. They arrived on Terra in time to man its defenses alongside the Imperial Fists, White Scars, and a myriad of other Loyalist forces. Amidst the burning spires and smashed fortifications that marked the Siege of Terra, the Blood Angels fought with a courage equal to any display in human history. But despite the unrelenting fury directed upon the traitor legions and the personal slaughter unleashed by Sanguinius, the battle seemed lost. At this moment, a last, desperate gambit was played. The Emperor and his custodies made a push to end the rebellion, teleporting directly onto Horus's flagship to face the traitor Warmaster personally. Sanguinius and his sons assembled beside their Emperor, along with Rogel Dawn and the Imperial Fists. But the boarding parties were scattered across the ship, and Sanguinius found himself facing down his brother, alone. Precisely what happened in that final confrontation has been lost, twisted by the sermons of the Ecclesiarchy and the censors of the Inquisition.
Yeah, interesting. Again, as we all know, authoritarian countries love rewriting uncomfortable truths with over-the-top romantic histories, right? So I'm going to guess because I truly don't know. The official history is that Sanguinius and Horus fought valiantly, and Sanguinius, he wounded Horus, but only a little bit, and then Horus killed him, and then Horus went and fought the Emperor, and because Sanguinius had weakened him, the Emperor was able to best Horus. So in a way, Sanguinius' death definitely couldn't be in vain, but they still have to explain the fact that he died. And in reality, let's see, what would reality be? Reality would be A, Horus just stabbed him in the back, right? Just straight up, like, cold-blooded killered him. Sanguinius never knew what happened. Or B, which I think is even more realistic, is that Sanguinius got killed because some stupid warp storm teleported him like half inside, half outside the ship, and he just died in some stupid accident, right? Something totally trivial and not at all befitting a Primarch, but very realistic, right? Excuse me. Look at General Patton. He was killed in a Jeep accident after the war ended. Stonewall Jackson was shot by his own troops. Who else? Somebody else died there was some... commenters, help me out. There's another famous general who was killed in a plane crash, like over the Pacific. Like routine transit between two bases. Yeah, help me out if you can remember.
But one thing is certain. Sanguinius had perished. When Horus was himself slain, Rogel Dawn would carry off the shattered Emperor to endure his fate within the Golden Throne, and it was left to the remaining Blood Angels to take Sanguinius' broken body away from the grasp of the enemy. In time, it would be carried back to Baal Secundus, interned in a great stasis tomb beneath their fortress monastery. This tomb would become the soul of the Blood Angels and every successor chapter they founded, a reminder that courage and sacrifice is their ultimate duty as his sons. Though Sanguinius' final moments are lost to the wider Imperium, the Blood Angels know too well the agony of that legendary confrontation. From the youngest neophyte to the most lauded veteran, the grim-hearted chaplain Astarath, and the ancient commander Dante, all hold the record of these events more fundamental than any other. When the great angel died, the full extent of the Black Rage was unleashed. The Primarch's psychic death scream echoed through his sons, through time itself, so that even 10,000 years later, that anguish can still be felt.
Interesting. Okay, that is an interesting part of lore, and you can always count on the warp to do that sort of stuff.
When the Black Rage takes hold of a brother in the midst of conflict or on the eve of battle, their minds are ripped from their time and taken back to this moment. Those afflicted believe themselves to be Sanguinius, or one of his proud champions, and imbued with a fraction of the strength and resilience of their Primarch. Any foe set before them appears as the arch-traitor Horus and his legions. The rage they feel is overwhelming.
Interesting. Yeah, that is new, actually, in lore, as far as I can tell, is the ability to have these, like, spiritual echoes kind of come back to people. Again, as we've discussed, the warp and its accompanying, quote, physics, unquote, are a pretty big deus ex machina for Warhammer 40k. But it is definitely true that they just keep adding this stuff on, right? This isn't even the warp, you know? So they're all astropaths? They're all psychers? Because I don't think that's supposed to be the case. I definitely don't think the Space Marines were supposed to have any sort of psychic or psyker connection. So, again, I'm curious if lore experts, if you know, is there some sort of workaround that lets them get away with this?
The Blood Angels were among the first of the remaining Loyalist legions to divide themselves into chapters in accordance with the Codex Astartes. To see their legion broken, even by their own hand, was a tragedy, but the Codex was seen not only as a source of military wisdom, but a means through which they could further hone their martial spirit and aid them in restraining their dark urges. In the 10,000 years since the fall of Sanguinius and the birth of the chapter, the Blood Angels have stayed largely true to the Codex Astartes.
Okay, largely. Mostly. Pretty much true. You know. Mostly.
To accommodate both the flaws in their gene seed and the character of their warriors, they have introduced many small changes and traditions. As with most Astartes legions, the Blood Angels are led by their chapter master and chapter council. The latter is made up of both the traditional chaplains, logisticians, and fleet captains.
It's logisticians, not logisticians.
Found in any chapter, but these individuals often hold other titles, not drawn from the Codex, but rather the history of Baal itself. Most honored among these are the members of the Sanguinary Guard and the Sanguinary Priesthood. The Guard is made up of the chapter's finest warriors, wearing armor and bearing weapons so ancient that they might be traced back to the Siege of Terror itself. They are known for the fearsome death masks they wear, cracking with halos of light that can shake the enemy with overwhelming feelings of terror. While many chapters field similar units.
I mean, I love all the intricate lore, but yeah, there's always this. All of Warhammer 40k is just more and more and more and more elite guards within subunits. It's pretty funny.
Warriors each. The role of the Sanguinary Priests are reserved for the sons of the original Legion alone. Similar to the apothecaries used by the wider Astartes, the Sanguinary Priests are deeply rooted in the blood of their Primarch and central to the traditions of the chapter. It is the priesthood that takes in raw recruits and oversees their transition to full battle brothers. They alone preserve the last drops of their Primarch's blood, weaving its essence into chalices so that their chapter might feel their father's presence or hear his voice. The Council of Bone and Blood is drawn from the priesthood, and it is this conclave that appoints a new chapter master, should one be required.
Okay, yeah, lore expert. So is it a single body that governs all the derivative chapters from the original Blood Angels? Or is it each chapter has their own subset? Because again, this would be interesting because most chapters answer only to their chapter master and perhaps the High Lords of Terra, maybe. So to see that there's at least a group of chapters who have an intermediate leadership body is actually pretty unique in lore.
Yet, those granted the positions of leadership over the Blood Angels know that theirs is a dying chapter. Among their many duties is to keep watch over their brothers for the signs of their ancient curse. Despite every effort, the Red Thirst still manifests itself in battle.
Yeah, and let me guess, they also grow fangs.
A shameful act, unless it is done in the most dire of circumstances, or under the guidance of the Sanguinary Priests. For most, the red thirst is but a temporary fall into a feverish blood madness. It is the black rage that is permanent.
Okay. Super Saiyan 1, Super Saiyan 2. Got it.
To those wholly gripped by the
I know you can come down from Super Saiyan 2. I know.
dying scream of their Primarch, only the Death Company awaits. This furious and morbid brotherhood is expected to perish in battle, their bright red armor painted in the black of mourning. Shepherded into the fiercest conflicts by skull-helmed chaplains, these raging berserkers hurl themselves into the midst of their foe, whether by jump pack or drop pod, and do not rest until every enemy lies broken around them. The Death Company is perhaps what awaits every member of the chapter, an unrestrained expression of their natural, honed abilities.
Okay, what I've noticed we haven't really heard much about is the art, empathy, and loving, lovey-dovey stuff. All I'm hearing is a group of very, very angry people, which I would be remiss to not say that extremes of passion are intrinsic to combat. Absolutely. I'm sure somewhere out there is someone who truly is missing some genes in their head and would not feel intense emotional surges in combat or in a fight. But man, they would be, I don't know if such a person even could exist, right? But having a heightened emotional state, especially one of anger, rage, and impulsivity, is a terrible state to fight in. It creates this tunnel vision. It makes you so very stupid, and you fixate on things. And they say I could tell you from experience, it takes a tremendous, deliberate effort to widen your vision, right? To not become fixated on the threat immediately in front of you, but to consider the wider picture, right? To begin to remember to think about your other units, your other vehicles, your mission, what's happening, what is the larger tactical situation. And it's interesting to see how that can impact people's decision-making in the moment. It's almost a trope at this point that especially fighters early in their UFC careers, right, will have a similar effect where they will drill and rehearse a very specific strategy for their opponent, and when they get in the cage, they just can't seem to stop themselves from biting down on their mouthpiece and swinging wildly. And that's just a terrible fight strategy. And there's other fighters that actually use that against them. If a fighter is known to be impulsive, known to be prone to these swing for the fences moments, then their opponents will often taunt them or bait them or encourage them to kind of lose that foresight, to abandon their strategy and pursue one of recklessness, right? So when you have those heightened emotional states, it really makes you vulnerable to strategic missteps or even traps by your enemy. So again, I question the efficacy of this sort of unbridled rage in the real world. But again, perhaps this is why they do their best to try to contain and then self-exterminate the individuals who are taken by this black rage.
Even within their regular units, however, Blood Angels have always favored close-quarters combat. Their battle companies field far more assault marines than any Codex-compliant chapter. This ferocity is equally present in its war machines. The Baal Pattern Predator exemplifies the chapter's approach to war, trading its longer-ranged weaponry for twin-linked assault cannons, an array of flamethrowers, and a far faster and more maneuverable chassis. Most impactful, however, is the Blood Angels' approach to heavy assault. The chapter and their successors have adapted a method of rapidly deploying Land Raider tanks through daring, low-altitude runs with their Thunderhawk gunships, releasing the vehicles into the heart of the foe, while trusting in the sturdiness of the machine spirit and the resilience of their brethren to survive.
That's a strategy. I mean, you could also use a parachute, but what do I know?
This method of assault is unseen in any other chapters. Even the white scars, or
Probably because it's not very smart.
space wolves, evidence of either the incredible skill or blood-fueled insanity inherent within the sons
Blood-fueled insanity, for sure.
of Sanguinius. This method of war, crafted by the Blood Angels Legion, has been passed down to its successor chapters. Scores of such chapters have been founded from the gene seed of the 7th Legion over the millennia. Some have upheld
Wait, I thought it was the 9th Legion.
the reverence for humanity that Sanguinius had hoped to instill in his sons, whilst others have only fallen further down the path to desolation. The Angels Encarmine and Angels Sanguine can both be said to strive for the values of humanity and nobility that the Primarch taught, whilst the Flesh Tearers, Blood Drinkers, and Exsanguinators have left a legacy of bloodshed and brutality to rival the old Revenant Legion.
Ah, okay. I appreciate this. The fact that some chapters just went full angry guy, and some chapters went full pretty boy.
Yet, in the hopeless situation the Imperium of Man finds itself within, it is possible even Sanguinius might have realized the need for both sides of the 7th Legion's legacy. With the galaxy entering the time of ending, even the Blood Angels have found themselves pushed to their limits by the encroaching darkness. The Third Tyrannic War reached its apocalyptic conclusion on the homeworld of the chapter, and the devastation of Baal has sundered the Blood Angels like no event since the heresy. So great was the peril of their ancient homeworld that every successor chapter to the Blood Angels, save but a few, rallied together to fight again as one legion in its defense. The victory at Baal is widely attributed to the supreme abilities of Lord Commander Dante, Chapter Master of the Blood Angels, or the timely intervention of the reborn Primarch Robute Guilliman. Yet,
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know Robute came back and bailed the Blood Angels out on Baal.
in truth, a great swath of the Tyranid Hive Fleet simply disappeared, with the only clue to their fate uncovered on the moon of Baal Prime. Here, Tyranid skulls were piled impossibly high in the 8-pillared icon of the chapter's most ancient of foes, the bloodthirster Kabanta. A message for the chapter that their destruction would be at his hands alone.
What? Who the hell is the Bloodthirster Kabanta? Is it a... Oh, is that... Wait, that's the Cornate Demon, isn't it?
That time may be drawing near.
I also just appreciate that, like, even if you're a demigod of the warp, you still are so petty that you have a specific gripe against, 100,000 slightly enhanced human beings? Like, an Astartes must look like so little to like a Cornate Demon.
For the largest warp storms in all existence have split the galaxy and the Imperium in two. Cut off from the light of the Astronomicon, Baal is no longer merely the homeworld of the Blood Angels, but the center of the Imperium Nihilus, upon which every hope now rests. Above Baal, a vast fleet is gathering, a newly formed battle fleet, making ready to crusade across the stars once more. At its head is Commander Dante, now Regent of this dark Imperium, elevated by Robute Guilliman himself to a level of authority unseen for millennia. Their duty is clear: to seek out every fallen world where the defenders of the Imperium cry out for salvation. This task is deadly, arduous, and impossible. But this is the very essence of the Blood Angels, the reason for which their old legion was crafted. On countless...
Okay, that's kind of poetic, right? The Imperium is split in two into a dark and light, and on the light side you have Robute, and on the dark side you have the Blood Angels, both fighting to try to, reunify humanity somehow. Again, all we need is Sanguinius to come back, right?
worlds across the Imperium Nihilus, though terrible powers gather in the darkness, and the Emperor's light has faded to a dim flicker, though every hope seems lost, and the victory of the Chaos Gods shines like a burning wound across 1,000,000 worlds, bells still toll in the night. Once each year, from the mightiest spires of temple worlds to the most humble steeples of forgotten hovels, bells are rung in the memory of a fallen angel. In these places, however dire the circumstances, a day is still taken to feast and remember. Stories are told of an imperial saint whose beauty, grace, artistry, and empathy for a brief moment lifted humanity towards the light of the Emperor, to a future more wonderful than mankind itself could ever imagine. They speak of a warrior who faced down his corrupted brother so that his father might seize victory from the anguish of defeat. But above all, tales are told of Sanguinius's avenging sons, a gleaming host of angels who, like their Primarch before them, have become the wrath of the Emperor, drowning all who take up arms against the Imperium in a scarlet tide of blood.
Yeah, I would really want to know. Okay, if I was to make a custom chapter based on the Blood Angels, they would absolutely have like an insane, disproportionate love of some obscure art form. They would all be like masterful impressionist painters, or like phenomenal musicians, like classical. Like every one of them would be like Bach. You know, just a real appreciation for art. They would have their servitors like programmed to be like perfect ballerinas, right? Put on these very elaborate operatic ballets, right? Retell Sanguinius's death with like original compositions, just like a total fixation on art and music and the creative act. And then also totally, absolutely friggin' insane on the battlefield, right? Like just almost uselessly angry, right? Really capture that duality. Unless that's how the Blood Angels are and it's just not covered in this video. But again, to me that's like intrinsic to it, right? I always think of someone who's like Sanguinius, right? A little bit of vanity of person, a love of grace, doing things artfully, right? Experiencing the deep feelings that are evoked. And maybe that's my own mind making these associations, associating the most noble impulses of human beings and linking them to our drive to create art, which it does appear, right? It's something that happens in every human culture, even very isolated ones. Human beings make music and they create art, even if it's as simple as cave art or rock carvings. And that tells us that it's probably an impulse that's hardwired into us because we all seem to do it. It's sort of bizarre to think about that even our close cousins, the great apes, who are cognitively so similar to us, never seem to do that, right? Sometimes we give them paints and they seem to be able to do things with the paints, but again, you would think that if they had that on an instinctual level, they would do it on their own. They would draw in the dirt. They would, have crushed berries and put them on a rock, something. But you just don't see it. And it's curious that within human beings, we all always seem to do that, right? Create art and music. Yeah, okay. This was actually really good. You know, I'm familiar, of course, with Robute because he's come back. I'm familiar with, obviously, Horus because he's the worst. But there's a lot of these other Primarchs whose stories I don't have fully fleshed out. So this was an awesome overview of Sanguinius. Of course, like we talked about, you know, how functional would a chapter that is just like succumbs to a horrific rage? It wouldn't be that functional. But it makes for great lore and it makes for a ton of fun. I'd be curious to know, are there any good like books that explore old Sanguinius's personality in a little more depth? Again, I felt like he got a one-dimensional or two-dimensional treatment here, and as did his Blood Angels, right? When there's a lot more to be fleshed out about their nature. So anyway, be sure, guys, of course, to check out the merch store, right? I'm rocking this shirt, but I got lots of new stuff that's going on sale. And be sure to follow me on Instagram and check out the second channel. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.